So, picture this scenario for a second. It's like a random Tuesday evening, right?
Okay, Tuesday evening.
Yeah, and you just walk through the door. You've had this incredibly long, just grueling day at work.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. So you drop your bag, you walk into the kitchen, and you see that the trash bag has like leaked all over the floor. And your partner, who has been home for hours, by the way, is just sitting on the couch, totally checked out, scrolling on their phone.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so you let out this heavy sigh, maybe your voice raises like just a fraction of a decibel, and you say, I am so frustrated, I asked you to take this out this morning.
A completely normal reaction.
Exactly. But your partner doesn't even look at the trash. They don't apologize. They slowly look up from their phone, narrow their eyes, and drop these three little words that just completely derail the entire evening.
You're overreacting.
You're overreacting. Yep.
It is, I mean, it's an immediate, visceral gut punch.
It really is.
Because in a fraction of a second, the entire architecture of the conversation just changes completely. We go from this concrete problem in the physical world, the literal trash on the floor, to this sudden, sweeping trial regarding your emotional stability.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are taking a massive magnifying glass to those three ubiquitous words. Because I think almost everyone listening has either been on the receiving end of that phrase or, and if we are being completely honest with ourselves, we've probably deployed it against someone else.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly common.
Right. But what happens when we actually crack open the hood of the phrase, you're overreacting? To do that, I've been going through this massive, fascinating stack of research. It's all centered around this document titled The Dark Truth Behind Your Overreacting.
It's a great compilation.
It really is. It pulls from all over the map. Like, we've got clinical literature from Medical News Today, psychological breakdowns from Simply Psychology, abuse recovery frameworks from the Men Project, relationship theory from boundaries.me, and even these incredibly raw, unfiltered threads from Reddit and Instagram where survivors are just, piecing this dynamic together in real time.
And honestly, the sheer breadth of those sources tells you something crucial right out of the gate.
What's that?
That this isn't just some niche phenomenon. I mean,
Right.
from the sterile environment of clinical psychology all the way to the messy reality of anonymous internet forums, you see the exact same behavioral patterns emerging over and over again.
So our mission today is to look at the hidden mechanics of this phrase. We want to understand why it is so frequently used as this cornerstone of emotional manipulation, and most importantly, how you, the listener, can protect your own emotional reality the next time someone tries to use it to shut you down.
I love that. Let's start right there with the concept of the shutdown, because on the surface, your overreacting really masquerades as helpful feedback.
Right. It sounds like they're just, I don't know, playing referee, like they're offering you a neutral reality check.
Exactly. They are essentially making this simple claim, which is, your reaction is mathematically larger than the situation warrants.
But it's a disguise, isn't it?
It's a very clever disguise.
Yeah.
The person saying it essentially appoints themselves as the ultimate objective judge of reality. They hold up this imaginary universal emotional thermometer. They look at the reading, and they just inform you that your internal temperature is simply incorrect.
Wow, yeah.
But when we look underneath that surface claim, the mental health writers in our sources totally agree that the phrase is actually delivering three deeply insidious, unspoken messages.
Okay, let's unpack those underlying messages. What's the first one?
So the first message is that your feelings are fundamentally flawed or illegitimate.
Okay.
The second message is that the speaker is absolved. Like, they do not have to examine their own behavior or whatever catalyst caused your upset.
So they're off the hook.
Totally off the hook. And the third message is the ultimate pivot. It establishes that the core problem in the dynamic is not what they did, but rather the fact that you have a problem with it. The problem is you.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if someone swallows that first underlying message, that their feelings are just fundamentally illegitimate, what does that actually do to their psyche long term? Because it seems to me like the psychological damage really takes root right there.
Oh, it alters the very foundation of how a person navigates the world. Medical News Today defines this specific tactic as trivializing.
Trivializing.
Yeah, which is a subset of gaslighting, where someone accuses you of being, too sensitive, specifically to belittle your emotional state. Think about the biological purpose of human emotion for a second.
Okay.
Our feelings, particularly negative ones like anger, sadness, or anxiety, they are our internal alarm systems. They evolved to tell us when a boundary has been crossed or when we are in danger or just when a situation requires our immediate attention.
Right, so it's like a smoke detector going off in the house.
Precisely. Now imagine the smoke detector goes off, you smell smoke, but someone standing next to you casually says, "Oh, you're overreacting, there's no fire. You just don't understand how air works."
That would make you feel crazy.
It does. And if they do that enough times, you stop trusting the alarm entirely. You start wondering if your nose is broken. When someone trivializes those alarms repeatedly, it quietly trains you to mistrust your own emotional reality.
You stop believing the data your own nervous system is giving you.
Exactly. And that leads directly to chronic confusion and this pervasive, lingering sense of anxiety. You just end up constantly auditing your own mind.
You know what it's like? It's like a magician's misdirection.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like they wave the wand of you're overreacting, so you look down at your own hands, obsessing over whether your reaction is the right size, while they completely hide the fact that they just stepped heavily onto your foot.
Yes.
I mean, the cognitive load of defending your sanity is so high in that moment that you completely forget to say, hey, get off my foot.
The misdirection is the entire point of the exercise. You are suddenly put on the defensive. You're forced into this weird courtroom where you have to litigate the exact volume, tone, and duration of your sadness or your anger.
And meanwhile, the foot stomping is ignored.
Right. While you are scrambling to prove that you are allowed to be upset, the original injury goes completely unaddressed. The person who stepped on your foot gets to lean back, cross their arms, and play the role of the calm, rational, objective observer. And you look like the erratic one.
So if this phrase acts as a magician's misdirection, it kind of begs the question of motive, right? Like, why do people reach for this specific trick so frequently?
That is the million-dollar question.
And that leads us directly into the manipulator's toolkit. Because our sources from the relationship and abuse resources outline 3 very specific, very dark motives for why manipulators lean on this phrase.
Let's look closely at the first one, which ties perfectly into your magician analogy.
Shifting the focus.
Yes. In clinical terms, we call this blame shifting. Domestic and emotional abuse literature points out this fascinating, almost seamless psychological pivot that manipulators use when they're confronted.
Can you give an example of how that pivot works?
Sure, let's create a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Let's say a partner, we'll call him Tom, makes a very sharp, cruel joke about his partner Sarah's weight. And he does it in front of their friends at a dinner party.
Yikes. Okay.
Right. So on the car ride home, Sarah brings it up. She says, that really hurt my feelings.
Now, in a healthy dynamic, the next step is pretty obvious. The focus stays on the action. Tom would just say, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that would hurt you. I shouldn't have said it.
Exactly. But the blame shifter changes the entire geometry of the conversation. Tom doesn't address the joke. He addresses Sarah's reaction to the joke.
Right.
He says, God, you are so hypersensitive, you're overreacting to a simple comment. Nobody else at the table thought it was a big deal.
And just like that, the spotlight swings violently away from Tom's cruel behavior.
And it glares directly, like blindingly onto Sarah's response.
So the original offense is essentially vaporized. Like, the conflict in that car is no longer about Tom being mean. The conflict is now entirely about Sarah's inability to take a joke.
He has successfully taken the blame for the disharmony of the evening and placed it squarely on her shoulders.
Wow. And this brings us to the second dark motive in the toolkit, which works, hand in hand with blame shifting.
Right, invalidating and silencing.
The excerpts from the Men Project in our source stack offer a really specific framework for what this does to a person over time. They define it as minimization.
Yes.
But wait, what is the mechanical difference between just disagreeing with someone and actively minimizing them?
That's a great distinction to make. So disagreement allows 2 realities to exist in the same room. I can disagree with your opinion while still validating that you have a fundamental right to hold it.
Okay, that makes sense.
But minimization is the active belittling of another person's perspective to diminish its value. It effectively crushes their confidence to speak up at all. When someone says you're overreacting, it is the most efficient, brutal way to signal that your emotional space is taking up way too much room.
And we see this heavily discussed in the Instagram psychoeducation posts from our sources, right? Like, it describes this profound, shrinking sensation of being dismissed.
It does. It completely prevents any real understanding from taking place.
Because you can't reach a compromise or a mutual understanding if one person dictates that the other person's reality simply isn't permitted to exist. It's like you're trying to play chess and they just flip the board and say, you don't even know how to play.
That's a perfect way to describe it. which serves the manipulator's ultimate goal, honestly. And this introduces the third motive, which is outlined by simply psychology.
Protecting their own self-image.
Yes, this is ego shielding.
This is where I really want to dig into the actual mechanics of accountability. Because why is dodging responsibility so important to these individuals that they are willing to completely crush their partner's reality just to do it?
Well, simply psychology notes that gaslighters engage in behaviors like trivializing and dismissing to gain control, yes, but fundamentally, it's about avoiding the deep, agonizing discomfort of responsibility.
Discomfort.
Think about the physiological and psychological mechanics of a genuine apology. To truly apologize, you have to admit that you are flawed. You have to admit that your actions caused pain. You have to sit quietly in the incredibly uncomfortable tension of the other person's hurt or anger, absorbing it without defending yourself.
Right.
And finally, you have to commit the energy to actually changing your behavior in the future.
I mean, that is an incredibly heavy lift. It requires vulnerability, emotional maturity, and honestly, a willingness to be the bad guy in your own internal narrative for a moment.
And it's a vulnerability. Most people, especially those prone to manipulative behaviors, have not built the emotional muscles to handle. Their egos are extremely fragile.
Okay, so if they can successfully label your response as excessive or, crazy, they get a free pass from all of that heavy lifting.
Exactly. If you are overreacting, then they didn't really do anything wrong. They don't have to sit with your hurt. They can just dismiss it as a manufactured drama.
So overreacting becomes this impenetrable, convenient shield for an ego that is just terrified of being wrong.
Precisely.
But wait, I have to ask, how does that square with intentionality?
What do you mean?
Like, are these people sitting around rubbing their hands together, mapping out an ego-shielding gaslighting campaign on a whiteboard? Because it feels almost too calculated, Like they're actively deciding, I'm going to destroy my partner's self-esteem today so I don't have to apologize for the dinner party.
I am so glad you brought that up because it is a crucial distinction to make. The vast majority of people who use this phrase are not Machiavellian masterminds plotting psychological warfare.
Okay, good. That would be terrifying.
Right. Often this is a highly automated, deeply ingrained reflex. It is a defense mechanism born out of a desperate need to escape the acute discomfort of feeling at fault.
So it's more like pulling your hand back from a hot stove. The hot stove is the feeling of shame or accountability, and your overreacting is just the reflex to pull away.
Yes, but here's the critical point.
Yeah.
Whether the strategy is highly conscious or completely subconscious, the mechanism of control is identical.
Oh, wow.
The intent might not be, I want to dismantle your grip on reality. The motive is simply, I need an escape hatch from this uncomfortable feeling, and making you the problem is the nearest exit.
But the collateral damage to the victim remains exactly the same, regardless of the perpetrator's self-awareness.
Exactly.
Okay, so if they are labeling the reaction as too big, simply so they can jump through that escape hatch, we have to pause and ask a really foundational question.
Which is?
Who actually gets to decide what too big even is? Is there some universal baseline, some objective emotional thermometer that we should all be calibrated to? Like, how much anger is mathematically appropriate for a cruel joke? This brings us to the psychology of reactivity itself, and what the sources call the myth of the objective reaction.
And the clinical psychologists in our research stack are unequivocal on this. The very concept of overreacting is deeply loaded, biased, and entirely subjective.
There is no universal baseline.
None. There's no universal baseline for human emotion. Dr. Becker-Feltz argues brilliantly in Arthrosis that the label overreaction is never an objective measurement. It is purely a judgment call based entirely on framing.
Framing. Explain framing in this context. Do you mean like how someone draws the borders around the specific event?
Yes. Think of it like a camera lens. If you zoom all the way in, drawing the frame very tightly around just the immediate isolated incident, say, dropping a plate in the kitchen,
Okay.
a massive emotional reaction to dropping a plate might look entirely disproportionate. It looks like you are literally crying over spilled milk.
Right, if that's all you see.
But if you zoom the camera out, if you widen the frame to include that person's entire week, their history, their current stressors, their physical health, and their specific emotional triggers, the reaction suddenly makes perfect logical sense.
Insight therapy actually lists out all these natural human factors that drive strong reactions. And it's fascinating because so much of it is just the raw biology of being a living organism.
Absolutely.
They mention perceived threats, general life stress, being sleep deprived, being hungry, being highly sensitive, or being triggered by unresolved past experiences. It's what researchers call allostatic load, right? The cumulative wear and tear on the body's stress response systems.
Exactly. We are not algorithms that output a uniform response to a specific input. We are biological organisms carrying around a lifetime of complex data.
Right.
So if a person hasn't slept well in 3 days, is worried about a potential layoff at work, and has a history of being belittled in past relationships, their nervous system is already humming at a 9 out of 10.
So the dropped plate is just the input that pushes them to a 10.
Yes. To look at that person and judge them purely on the plate is incredibly reductive.
Boundaries.me takes this concept and pushes it even further, and I found this to be a profound paradigm shift when I read it.
Oh, their take on this is brilliant.
They write that in one sense, overreactions aren't actually overreactions at all. They argue that while an emotion might seem larger than the objective situation sitting right in front of you, the reaction is 100% mathematically perfectly sized for that person's inner world, their hidden context, and their unhealed pain.
It completely changes how we view emotional outbursts.
It really does.
It means that even when a reaction looks wildly intense from the outside, there is always a psychological and physiological calculus behind it. The nervous system is simply processing the internal data it has access to. Using your overreacting as a blunt verdict lazily skips over all of that necessary vital nuance.
I want to try an analogy here because this is where the mechanics really clicked for me.
Go for it.
It's like looking at a seismograph during an earthquake. Imagine you are standing in a perfectly quiet, seemingly stable room looking at this machine. You don't know that there's a massive tectonic fault line shifting and grinding miles underground.
Okay.
Suddenly, the needle on that seismograph starts jumping wildly all over the paper. Now, if you don't understand geology, you look at the quiet room, you look at the needle, and you tap the glass and you say, this machine is broken, it's overreacting to absolutely nothing.
Oh, that's so good.
But if you know the geological history of the terrain, if you understand the unseen massive pressures building beneath the surface, you realize the machine isn't broken at all. It is working perfectly. It is recording exactly what is happening in the deep.
That is a brilliant visualization. When someone dismisses your reaction, they are staring at your seismograph, refusing to acknowledge the existence of your fault lines and just unilaterally declaring that you are broken. And when we understand that our reactions are inextricably tied to our inner worlds, the blunt, thoughtless use of your overreacting reveals itself as incredibly dismissive, even in mild situations.
But what happens when that dismissal isn't just an isolated incident?
Right.
What happens when someone is constantly tapping the glass of your seismograph day after day, telling you your machinery is defective? Our sources show that when this happens repeatedly, it stops being just poor communication.
What metastasizes.
Exactly. It moves from a clumsy mistake into something highly destructive. This is what the sources call the slippery slope to gaslighting.
There is a definitive, observable tipping point where bad communication ends and psychological abuse begins.
Where is that point?
Well, when your overreacting transitions from an occasional defensive reflex into a chronic weaponized theme in a relationship, you have entered gaslighting territory.
Yeah.
The gaslighting guides in our research describe 3 distinct escalating patterns that form this slope. First, you have the entry-level behavior, which is trivializing. We discussed this earlier, saying you're too sensitive or you're overreacting to shut down a minor complaint.
So it starts small, almost passing as normal bickering, but then it escalates to the second pattern, which is dismissing.
Right. Dismissing is more aggressive. It sounds like it's really not a big deal, or you're making a mountain out of a molehill.
It is the flat, absolute denial of the event's importance. It tells the victim that their priorities and values are inherently warped.
Exactly. And finally, you hit the bottom of the slope with the third pattern, countering.
Countering. This felt the most destabilizing to me when I was reading the literature.
It is, because countering is a direct assault on the victim's memory and perception. This is when the manipulator says you aren't remembering correctly, or that never happened, or you're imagining things. They are actively rewriting history to suit their narrative.
The progression there is terrifying. It goes from your feelings about this event are wrong to this event doesn't matter to this event literally did not occur.
Yes.
And what really struck me in the source material were the long-term outcomes of this progression. We have these incredibly poignant insights from Reddit threads and survivor discussion forums, and the erosion of self-trust is just chilling.
It is the slow, systematic dismantling of a person's reality. Survivors note that over time, living under the crushing weight of repeated invalidation, their brain begins to adopt the abuser's perspective just to survive.
That makes sense, sadly.
You end up questioning whether your feelings are ever valid. You start to view your own emotions, which, remember, are your necessary biological alarms, as a nuisance or a liability. You doubt your own memories of hurtful events, thinking maybe they are right, maybe it wasn't that bad, maybe I am just dramatic.
And tragically, the sources mention that victims reach a point where they end up apologizing for simply having feelings at all.
Yes, that is incredibly common.
They find themselves saying, I'm sorry just because they started crying during a movie, or I'm sorry because they felt the pang of frustration.
It breaks my heart every time I see it in clinical practice.
If you're listening to this right now and you are realizing that you have been apologizing to your partner or your family members just for feeling sad or feeling hurt, I want to pause and highlight what the source material points out as a massive, glaring red flag.
Please do.
That urge to apologize is not a flaw in you. You aren't fundamentally broken or too much. That instinct to apologize for your own internal state is a direct engineered symptom of the manipulation you've endured.
That is the ultimate dark truth the original document refers to. This phrase, when weaponized over time, doesn't just shut down the immediate argument. It slowly, methodically teaches you to shut down yourself.
Wow.
It is a highly effective form of psychological conditioning that turns the victim into their own secondary abuser. You begin gaslighting yourself before the other person even has to open their mouth.
But I want to introduce a little bit of friction here because I think it's vital to look at all sides of this human experience.
Okay, let's do it.
We've established how dark this can get. But what if the person saying you're overreacting isn't trying to gaslight you? What if they aren't trying to condition you or break down your reality? What if they're just like incredibly bad at talking about feelings?
That is a very fair point.
We need to explore the gray area, the crucial difference between clumsiness and cruelty, the intent versus effect divide.
It is absolutely vital to acknowledge this nuance because human beings are messy and our communication is often deeply flawed. Simply Psychology and several of the social media posts in our stack explicitly state that not every single use of the phrase "you're overreacting" is an act of intentional, malicious abuse.
The sources outline two fairly innocent origins for the phrase, and the first one is simply a poor emotional vocabulary.
Right. Think about how many people were raised in environments where emotional expression was never modeled, let alone taught. They never learned how to articulate complex internal states.
Right, they just don't have the words.
So imagine a scenario where you are crying intensely and your partner is completely overwhelmed. Instead of possessing the emotional vocabulary to say, I feel incredibly overwhelmed and slightly panicked by your tears right now, and I don't know how to comfort you, or the intensity of your anger is activating my own fight or flight response.
Which would be amazing if they could say that.
It would be amazing. But instead, they default to the only blunt instrument they have that pushes the discomfort away. They blurt out, you're overreacting. They are projecting their own internal inability to cope onto you.
So it's an emotional fumble.
Exactly.
And the second innocent origin is genuine confusion. If they don't know your history, if they literally cannot see the fault lines under your seismograph, a reaction might genuinely baffle them.
Yes.
If you panic because they left a cabinet door open, and they don't know that in your childhood home, open cabinets were a precursor to a screaming match, they might truly not understand why this specific situation triggered such a massive emotional wave.
That is a very real possibility in many relationships. However, and this is perhaps the most important caveat that our clinical sources emphasize, intent does not erase effect.
Oh, that's huge. Say that again, because I think a lot of people excuse bad behavior based on intent.
Intent does not erase effect.
Wow.
Even if the invalidation is entirely unintentional, born of pure clumsiness and emotional illiteracy rather than cruelty, it still causes severe psychological damage. Repeated, unintentional invalidation still makes someone doubt their perceptions.
Right.
It still damages trust in the relationship.
Yeah.
And it absolutely blocks real, authentic emotional intimacy from forming.
Let's go back to the foot analogy. It's like accidentally stepping on someone's foot versus doing it on purpose.
Let's hear it.
If you look me in the eye and maliciously stomp on my foot to hurt me, that makes you a monster. But if you are just clumsy, looking at your phone, and you stumble backward onto my foot by accident, sure, your lack of malicious intent matters a lot when I am evaluating your overall character.
Of course it does.
But functionally, physically. Either way, my foot is broken. I am still in excruciating pain. You can't use, I didn't mean it as a cast for my broken bone. You still have to get off my foot, you still have to acknowledge the injury, and you still have to help me fix it.
That perfectly illustrates the reality of emotional injury.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how do we tell the difference between a clumsy partner who just lacks vocabulary
Yeah.
and a cruel manipulator who is actively avoiding accountability?
Right. How do we test that?
The sources provide the ultimate diagnostic litmus test for the relationship. Can the person hear feedback? What happens when you hold up a mirror to their behavior?
Walk me through what that looks like in practice.
So you wait for a calm moment and you say to them clearly and without attacking, when you use the word you're overreacting, it makes me feel deeply dismissed and unheard. It shuts me down. Then you watch their response. That response is your diagnostic data. Do they pause, consider your perspective, apologize for the negative impact of their words regardless of their intent, and actively choose to try different vocabulary next time? Or do they double down?
Right. Do they get defensive and tell you that you are overreacting to being told you're overreacting?
Exactly. If they refuse to alter their behavior once they have been clearly informed that the behavior causes you pain, you are no longer dealing with clumsiness. You are dealing with a conscious choice to prioritize their own ego over your emotional safety.
That is the dividing line right there. The willingness to adjust based on the pain you've caused.
Absolutely.
But whether the person sitting across from you is clumsy or cruel, whether they are a stumbling partner or a dedicated manipulator, you, the listener, need tools. You need a structured way to protect your emotional reality when those three words are thrown your way, especially in the heat of the moment when your adrenaline is spiking.
Yes.
Which brings us to the final and most actionable section of our deep dive,
Yeah.
reclaiming your reality.
Our sources provide actionable, expert-suggested defense strategies. These are not about winning the argument. They are about holding on to your sanity and protecting your internal reality without abandoning yourself.
Love that.
We have 5 specific steps to walk through, and it's important to understand the psychology behind why each one works.
Let's take these one by one and really flesh them out. Step 1 is translate, don't swallow. What does that mean in the literal moment?
When someone lobs you're overreacting at you, the immediate conditioned reflex, especially if you have a history being validated, is to swallow the phrase whole. Your brain accepts it as a statement of fact. You internalize the judgment and think, oh no, I am flawed, my reaction is wrong, I need to shrink.
Right, you take the poison pill.
Exactly. So the first step is a cognitive behavioral technique. You have to mentally intercept that phrase before you swallow it and translate it from a judgment into a neutral observation.
How do you do that cognitive reframing when your heart is beating fast and you are upset?
You practice mentally changing their sentence. When they say you're overreacting, you tell yourself. What they are actually saying is, there is a mismatch between how they perceive the situation and how it feels in my body. Or they're experiencing a reaction that is bigger than they anticipated.
That reframing is incredibly powerful because it instantly removes the moral judgment from your emotion. It takes it from an objective ruling about your sanity and turns it into a simple, boring data point about a mismatch in expectations.
Yes.
Your reaction can be bigger than their expectation, and it can still be entirely real, valid, and meaningful.
Exactly. It de-escalates your own internal panic.
Yeah.
Which leads to step 2. Ask clarifying questions.
Okay.
If you determine that the relationship is basically healthy, if you suspect this is a moment of clumsiness, you can respond by shifting the burden of explanation back onto them rather than defending yourself.
So instead of frantically listing all the reasons why you are allowed to be mad, you ask them to explain their judgment. What are the exact words you should use?
You keep your tone neutral, and you ask, what part of my reaction feels too big to you? Or, can you tell me what you expected me to feel in this moment?
I love this because it forces them to be specific. It stops the vague, sweeping dismissal and demands actual granular communication.
It does.
But I have to push back on this step.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm looking at the dynamic here, and the sources specifically say to use this if the relationship is basically healthy. What if the listener realizes, maybe through this very deep dive, that they are in a pattern of emotional abuse?
That is a crucial distinction.
It seems to me like asking clarifying questions to a dedicated, cruel gaslighter is just handing them a loaded gun.
Yeah.
You're giving them the microphone so they can list out a bulleted inventory of all the ways you are supposedly crazy and defective.
You're absolutely right to highlight that danger, and the clinical experts entirely agree with your assessment.
Oh, they do?
Yes. These tools are dual purpose. They're also diagnostic. If you ask a clarifying question like, what did you expect me to feel?
Yeah.
and the response is a genuine, if clumsy, attempt to understand your perspective, you are in a workable dynamic.
Right.
But if asking clarifying questions leads to an immediate barrage of more countering, more dismissing, and more cruelty, if they use the opportunity to attack your character further, it confirms the dark truth of the dynamic.
It's data collection for you. It proves the system is rigged.
Exactly. It empowers you to stop trying to negotiate your reality with someone who's actively committed to misunderstanding you. You realize the game is rigged, so you stop playing, and you pivot immediately to seeking external support rather than further internal negotiation.
Which brings us to step 3, which is crucial regardless of whether the relationship is healthy or abusive. Anchor in your inner context. This sounds like somatic grounding.
It is about profound self-validation. In the exact moment you are accused of overreacting, you have to remind yourself of your own internal seismograph. You internally validate your nervous system. You tell yourself, my nervous system is reacting to more than just this exact moment in time. It is reacting to my history, my past experiences, my current stress levels, and my specific triggers.
The sources make a beautiful, compassionate point here. They say that having a reaction shaped by your history doesn't make you wrong, and it doesn't make you illegitimate. It simply makes you human.
I love that.
You might still decide later, in a calm, regulated moment on your own, you know what, I want to work on managing my reactions better. I don't like yelling. But you can work on emotional regulation without ever accepting the toxic label that your feelings themselves are crazy.
Precisely. Emotional regulation is about managing the outward intensity of the behavior.
Right.
It is not about denying the internal validity of the underlying emotion.
Step 4 is watch for patterns, not just one phrase.
We touched on this with the slope to gaslighting, but it requires zooming out and taking a macro-level view of the relationship.
Okay, so looking at the big picture.
Yes, you have to look at the data points over a timeline. Is this a one-off, clumsy comment made during a highly stressful, sleep-deprived argument about finances? Or is your overreacting their default automated response whenever you express pain, disappointment, or a need for a boundary?
Right.
If it is a regular substitute for listening, that is the hallmark of chronic minimization.
And finally, step 5, which might be the most vital lifeline for anyone deep in the fog of this dynamic. Seek outside reality checks.
When you are trapped inside a funhouse full of distorted, warped mirrors, you cannot trust your own reflection. You will think you look crazy.
That's terrifying.
The only way to know what you actually look like is to step outside the funhouse. The sources strongly recommend talking to someone you implicitly trust, a close friend, a licensed therapist, or a support group.
And what do you ask them?
Describe the situation and your reaction as honestly and factually as possible, and explicitly ask them, does this seem completely out of proportion, or is my reaction understandable given the context?
Getting an outsider's perspective is like opening a window in a dark, stuffy room. It just lets the actual objective air in. And the sources also heavily emphasize journaling in this step, which I think is a fascinating mechanism for defense.
Journaling is incredibly effective.
Writing things down is a powerful way to combat self-minimization because it leaves a concrete paper trail. You can look back a week later and say, no, I remember exactly what was said, I wrote down the exact timeline, and I remember exactly why it hurt.
Journaling anchors you to your own historical data. It prevents the gaslighter from successfully rewriting your memory of the event because you have externalized the memory onto the page.
So synthesizing everything we've explored today, the journey we've taken from the surface mechanics of a kitchen argument all the way down to the deep neurobiology of the nervous system, brings us to a very clear, if sobering, conclusion. The phrase "you're overreacting" is almost never about helping you regulate your emotions. It is fundamentally a shield designed to protect the other person from their own discomfort. It is a calculated or sometimes reflexive dodge of accountability.
Yes.
And most dangerously, when used repeatedly, it is a weapon that slowly trains you to view your own emotions, your own necessary biological alarm systems, as the enemy.
The primary takeaway for you, listening to this deep dive, is that you are always allowed to explore your reactions. You are allowed to seek therapy, practice mindfulness, and try to understand why your emotional waves are so high.
Absolutely.
But you never ever have to accept the premise that feeling deeply makes you inherently wrong or broken.
Exactly. But before we sign off, there is one final, larger thought that naturally arises from synthesizing all of this source material.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire time unpacking how your overreacting operates in private, intimate relationships between partners, friends, or family members. But if we understand that this phrase is a mechanical tool used to shift focus, avoid accountability, and maintain control on a micro level.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It raises a profoundly important, wider question. How might this exact same psychological mechanism be operating on a macro level?
Yes.
Consider how often large institutions, corporate workplaces, or entire societal structures use subtle variations of you're overreacting or you're being too sensitive to silence collective complaints.
Oh, wow. That is a massive connection. Think about whistleblowers or employees demanding better working conditions or marginalized groups pointing out systemic
It
inequities.
happens all the time.
The institutional response is so often a giant structural version of gaslighting. A corporate PR department or an HR rep might label the collective reaction of a workforce as hysterical or disproportionate, specifically to avoid systemic accountability and maintain the profitable status quo.
If the psychological tactics of minimization, blame shifting, and ego shielding are fundamentally the same, whether it's a partner sitting in your living room or a massive corporation sitting in a boardroom, then your tools for reclaiming your reality are just as vital out in the world as they are in your own home.
That is so true.
You have to translate the institutional jargon, look for the macro patterns of dismissal, and anchor yourself in the shared reality of your community.
That is a tremendous amount to chew on. The mechanics of control really do scale up, from the kitchen table to the corporate office. We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's heavy, complicated material, but understanding exactly how the magic trick works is the only way to stop falling for the misdirection. So until next time, keep checking your own measurements, don't let anyone tell you your internal alarms are broken, and always, always trust your inner seismograph.